Alright, welcome back to the JFK Assassination Audit. It's number 24, 16 December, and we're going to go over this information. Eventually, we're working our way back down to the timeline, but like I said, I've been going through all these documents here, especially the ones in the last 5 years, 2017 to 2018. Mary Farrell has a lot of good stuff. I especially like Oswald's 201 file. And I used to be under the impression, so did a lot of other people, that a 201 file was just for an informant. So if you were in the FBI and you were getting paid as an informant, or the CIA, they'd open up a 201 file for you and like that. But apparently that's not the case. I don't know the exact legal definition of a 201 file, but I'm reading through these files and it looks like a 201 file is kind of an open file for all like defense and intelligence related departments, that they can all jointly put in documents to look at and share, and keep track of someone. So like Oswald, they would keep track of him because he is a defector in the Soviet Union. So the FBI would keep track of that. The CIA would keep track of that. Maybe even the Department of Defense, the Navy intelligence would keep track of that. When Oswald came back, he'd still have that same 201 file, and he'd have that would be shared with the State Department because of his, his status and his citizenship status and his passport and stuff like that, and then also INS because of his wife's status, maybe even the IRS, because to find out what his income, and then even the Postal Service would have access to the certain documents in the 201 file because of Oswald using that alias to get that rifle. Maybe even the ATF would have access to the 201 file. So it seems to be the 201 file, to me, what I'm coming across is that it's a means to share information and gather information from other departments. Like the ATF may have certain records about Oswald or about this gun that they could put in the 201 file, and that would be shared with the FBI and the Secret Service and things like that. So that's kind of my unofficial definition I'm coming across. One thing, though, it's really interesting is that each department has access to that 201 file, so they're making copies of it. And so, as they're cleaning out their desk over the years, they're sending all these 201 files and all these documents separately to the to NARA, to the National Archives. And so what I'm coming across is that you've got the same documents about 10 different times. But some, you have to look at them a little different because each department seems to be putting their little notes on there for routing and all kinds of stuff. So, and then also inside, like in this CIA document, you've got this document going to different departments inside the CIA right there. So, but anyway, so a 201 file doesn't mean you're automatically an informant. If you are an informant, you would have a 201 file, but just because you have a 201 file doesn't mean you're an informant. Because it looks to me that a 201 file just opened up on someone that they can all share documents, put documents in, and share that information amongst their different departments they're investigating or whatever. So, Garrison was under the mistaking, I guess he was under the mistake, or it's been reported that he was thinking that Oswald was a paid informant for the CIA or the FBI because he had a 201 file. And that's not actually the case. It looks like a 201 file is just kind of a shared file between different departments, so they can add and access different documents from different agencies and stuff. So that's what it seems like so far. I don't have an official explanation of what a 201 file is yet, but that's what I'm coming across. It looks like I'm seeing the same documents from different departments, and it's all listed as, as 201. And I'll show it right here. Let's see like this. There's Oswald's 201 file number. agency file number. And each agency would have that same number, and then therefore they could share the same documents. And let's see if he has it on this old document here. And a lot of these are top secret all the way up to like 1996, or for 30 years you got documents in Oswald's 2-1 files that were completely top secret. You know, so I don't know why. And that brings up another question I have, is if Oswald is just a communist loser that killed Kennedy on his own, and there's no conspiracy, no government involvement, no agencies involved, why are all these documents secret, top secret for 30 fucking years? You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't make any sense that someone who did it on their own is a loser, and there was no cooperation with other agencies or persons or government or anything like that. Why would that have to be secret, top secret for, 30 something years? I mean, I understand you can redact names and sources, but a lot of this stuff should have been released back in the 60s and 70s. But here we are, and a lot of these documents, I mean, like this one here, looks like it was approved for release in 94, 96, 96, but is in this batch of documents that wasn't even released until like maybe 2017, which I don't understand how, if the AARB is, maybe I'm not up on the law of the AARB, but if the AARB is a committee approved by Congress, given the authorization to go in by Congress and decide what documents should be released, why are these documents being released almost 20 years later after they're approved by the AARB to be released? That doesn't make any sense. It's almost like a flaunting of the power of Congress. And Congress being our elected representatives, if an agency is willing to flaunt the law and to flaunt the will of the Congress, thus flaunting our will, the will of the people, are we really in control of that agency? We're giving them money and they do what they want. And that to me doesn't seem exactly right. But anyway, so this is another document here, a little follow-up on this guy, Regeb. This is this Moroccan guy that said he had a relationship with Marina Oswald. He contacted the U.S. Embassy in West Berlin around, 3 days after the assassination, 25 December. That would have been the next Monday after the embassies were open. And contacted him and says, hey, that woman, Marina, that's married to Oswald, I had a relationship with her in Moscow around the same time, which doesn't make any sense, because if you look at the dates, I went over the dates yesterday, he started seeing her in January and saw her all the way, was in contact with her all the way till July, and was even seeing and dating her all the way up till May. And in April, this Marina, or the Marina, there's another Marina in Minsk that was in contact with Oswald. They both met similar circumstances. Regeb and Oswald both met this Marina in similar circumstances at a trade hall dance. Regeb also seems to know or understand that, even though he's having a relationship with this woman, she was probably working for the KGB, not as an agent, but just an informer. That they were sending in these young girls to, meet and make contact with foreigners and tourists, to, figure out what they're up to, report back whatever they heard, and then to sympathize with them, saying they're against the regime, against the communist government, and then, try to see how, I can understand it. What they're doing is just trying to fill out these tourists, these students, to see if they're really legit. Okay? Same thing with Oswald. They would have done the same thing. So either Marina went to Oswald as one of these informants and her whole marriage was a scam and a farce, or she went as a paid informant and then legitimately fell in love with him, and and all that kind of stuff. It was really quick. I mean, within 6 weeks they were married, so that's pretty quick. But Regeb seems to know the deal, and like I said, I doubt that his marina is the same as Oswald's marina, because it's 800 kilometers or 800 miles or something from Minsk to Moscow, and he's saying he's seeing this girl 3-4 times a week. So she's shuttling back and forth between Moscow and the train or the plane. That's some heavy duty action, traveling back and forth. I think that it was a very similar looking girl who had the same name with with a different last name. Okay, and maybe even you could say that the KGB had their own Marina project that was out there. All their informants are named Marina, and they look similar, and they put them out there trying to infiltrate these tourists and foreign students and trying to figure out what their motivations are, see if they can maybe use them as intelligence operatives when they go back to their country, or to see if they've been sent as spies. Kind of feel them out, get that bedroom pillow talk, and really know what's going on there. And of course, a lot of these girls aren't KGB trained, at the KGB academy. They're just picked off the street, or maybe they're the daughters of KGB, relatives of KGB officers, or maybe they're just prostitutes that've been hired, or maybe they're making them a deal, hey, you go work for us, or work off some of your time. Could have various different women from various different sources, or they could just be girls that, hey, they put out an ad in Craigslist Moscow, hey, make extra money, meet foreign people and travel, and they're just reporting, they go to dances and they, hang out with these guys and they chit chat and go to dinner and then just report back, to their handler what they're hearing. Could be just as innocent as that. Okay, or it could be compromise. They're sent purposely to sleep with these guys, to compromise them, like they did with Trump, and and then use them, turn them around, and use them as agents in the United States. Possible, but Regeb seems to know what the deal is, and this is just a follow-up that he was probably part of a Communist Party cell in Morocco, and that people in the Communist Party, they had the CIA had people in the Communist Party that had informants that told them, the CIA, that they knew that Regeb was an informant. Now, for who knows? So it could be also that Regeb is completely lying and been paid to spread false information. But it seems to me his information is pretty correct there, except for the fact that he doesn't realize he's seeing a different marina. It's not this. It can't be the same marina, because, like I said, it's 800 kilometers apart. They're seeing him at the same time. So, completely different person. Okay, so we're going to keep going on here. Keep going through these documents, and let me see here. So on that note, I did want to mention that the FBI used to run a program called COUNTERTEL Pro, and they would do this with various groups: the KKK, white nationalist groups, civil rights groups. They even did it to Martin Luther King. And then what they would do, depending on what they wanted to do or find out, they would, put in false propaganda, false information. So they'd have informants. The informants would tell them what's going on in that group, and then they would feed information back to the informant, and the informant would feed it to whoever his group was, and basically cause trouble. So you saw this in this movie Mississippi Burning, where Gene Hackman, they go down and they grab one of the head, or one of the lower level or mid-level KKK members, and then they They put him in the FBI car, which is obviously an FBI car, and they drive him slowly through the center of town so everybody who's involved in the KKK can see him going off with the FBI. And that causes contention because they think that, okay, this guy's working for the FBI, you can't trust him. And really the FBI is just fucking with him. They took this guy by force, and he's not really an informant, he's just being forced to pretend like that. So that's what the FBI does. The FBI also did things involved with the civil rights movement. They try to, put people in there that were communists and try to say that the whole civil rights movement was a communist front and try to undermine it. And then, they tried to say that Martin Luther King was having sexual relationships with different people, different women, and maybe even homosexual relationships and all these kinds of bullshit. Because, J. Edgar Hoover didn't really believe in the civil rights movement. He thought it was a communist front to cause agitation among the races in the United States, and he generally just didn't like black people. So that's what the Counter-Intel Pro would be involved in. So to sit and think that the FBI wouldn't do illegal things or undermining things to put a case in a certain point of view or light is kind of naive, because the FBI has a clear history of doing these kind of things. The reason I'm mentioning this is because if you think that that's the normal FBI, okay, but if you have right-wing members of the FBI that control certain departments, just think what they could do with various informants and cash. They could definitely hype up that Oswald was definitely a communist, even though they knew he wasn't a communist, and make things look a certain way that weren't exactly correct. Just like they tried to make, Martin Luther King look like he was a communist. Totally ridiculous. But that's just one point I wanted to put across there. Everybody knows about FBI Counter-Intel Pros and how they've worked and how they, basically what they were trying to do, the main thing, was to cause contention within groups and have them fighting against each other, like in the Klan, in the Civil Rights Movement, even the Black Panthers, they did this. So instead of them having a unified front on the inside, these groups would deteriorate from the inside, and this is exactly what happened to the Black Panthers if you look at them. Whether that would have happened with or without the FBI's involvement, who knows. But all these different groups, you destroy them from within, and they become weak, and then they're less of a threat to the United States or security or whatever. Anyway, so that's Counter-Intel Pro. And again, not saying that Oswald was an informant for the FBI, but if you're going to go after communist groups or people that are on their way to joining a communist group, you want to have someone like Oswald that's out there in the front, infiltrating, advocating, and destroying them from within. But again, notice that Oswald never joins any of these groups, okay? And all he's doing is advocating. And so that, in public, that paints him as someone, we're never going to come across any paperwork so far that says, yeah, Oswald was attending our underground leftist, communist, socialist meetings, and we knew who Oswald was, and we didn't trust him because we thought he was an FBI informant or he was crazy. You'll never see those documents, okay, because they don't exist. What was out there for Oswald, being a radical communist, whatever, was for public consumption, not for Counter-Intel Pro and infiltration by the FBI like they would usually do to destroy these groups, okay? Alright, but again, it all has to do with establishing Oswald's leftist, communist, affidavit, or what do you want to call it, his legend in the public there, okay? And then that goes along. It's easier to sell that to the public later on that, yeah, that's what he was. Alright, so I don't have any documents on this, but I just wanted to mention again that, think about it, Oswald was either crazy as the Warren Commission said he was, or he was a freaking genius, or he was just some average guy that was used to carry out a mission by the government or by like-minded, right-wing, conservative Confederates inside different departments of the government, the FBI, the Secret Service, the Dallas Police, the Mafia, and Cuban exiles. Because here we are, 60 years later, still discussing this loser who couldn't hold a job, who couldn't decide if he wanted to be a communist or come back to the United States. So either Oswald is in heaven laughing his ass off at, hey, I made it. I went from a nobody loser to becoming this person that everyone talks about and can never decide, and just goes on and on and on. And thousands, if not millions, of documents discussed about me, even though there was no conspiracy, but thousands of documents generated by the government, not just my government, the Russian government, the Soviet government, the German government, the UK government, the Mexican government. Think about that. You know, I mean, talking about get your rocks off. If you're a loser, okay, and you're nobody, and no one's paying attention to you, and then 60 years later, Oswald has more documents on him than anyone else. I mean, can you think of anyone else, any one individual in the entire history of the United States that's created more documents, that's created more court cases, that's created more media being spent on him? There's no one inside the United States history, not even Lincoln, okay, that's created more controversy, more documents, more people reading about. It's just incredible. So either Oswald was a fucking genius and said, it's better to be infamous than to be famous, or no, it's better to be infamous than to be no one or nobody. So he's this infamous genius that caused the whole government to almost collapse and to go into a frenzy, split left and right, okay, and he did it all with a little lanky little horrible fucking peacemaker Italian weapon, and just got off a lucky shot and killed Kennedy. And either he's a loser, maniac, revolutionary like the Warren Commission says, or he's a fucking infamous genius. You decide. Okay? My personal opinion is that Oswald's sitting in heaven going, what the fuck happened? Still shaking his head 60 years later. Why are they generating all these documents? Why are 10, 15 countries discussing me, having top secret documents for 60 fucking years, and I was just this guy that worked in a loser that couldn't even hold a job or hold his marriage together, so, you know, gathering books and mailing them out. That's all I was. You know, think about it. Anyway, that's my little rant about Oswald. Like, he must be either a lunatic, okay, a crazy Marxist revolutionary, or he is a fucking genius that's got us all spinning our wheels and heels, and, you know, 10, 20 different governments are generating thousands of, I mean, Oswald, you know, the paper and lumber industry should set up a memorial to Oswald, okay, for keeping them in business, because literally millions of paper documents have been created because of Oswald. If Oswald never existed, whole industries of lumber and printing and research and book publishing and videos would all been out of business or never existed. Just think about that. Think about how many people's careers in the government have depended on Oswald. Without him they never would have been employed. Think about it. So either Oswald was this loser, infamous genius, or who knows. Anyway, that's my little rant there about Oswald. Okay, so we'll keep going. Let's see what else we have here. Alright, so we're going to get back into the rifle, which is the most important, one of the most important things, I think. I wish I could find this entire CBS inquiry about that. But I can't, so I don't know what to do on that. Hold on one second. Alright, so go back to about the rifle and the paraffin test. This is a really good one, summation by 22 November 1963.org.uk. So the rifle was found on the 6th floor of the Texas Schoolbook Depository, could not be aimed accurately. Paraffin tests suggest that Lee Oswald had not fired a rifle on the day of the assassination. They don't just suggest, they emphasize that Oswald never fired a rifle. Okay, remember I went over the paraffin test and how the nitrates would shoot into his skin if he had, into his cheek, if he had been firing that rifle. One thing I was thinking about is they only did a right cheek. I wonder if Oswald was a left eye shooter. It doesn't make much sense though. If you're right-handed, you're going to fire from using your right eyeball. But I've seen some people that are right-handed fire with using their left eyeball to sight in on. Very rare though. Again, the rifle, they had to adjust the rifle just to get it to fire. Okay. Let's see. It said shims had to be applied to the telescopic sight before the rifle could be aimed. So if they had to add shims, which is basically you put these little metal plates under the scope to line it up with the sight in the front, if they had to do that then to fire the rifle, Oswald obviously couldn't have fired it accurately in the present condition it was left in, just maybe a few seconds before. So even after the telescope sight had been repaired, it proved unreliable and inaccurate. Wow. The condition of both the bolt and the trigger pull meant the rifle could not be aimed accurately. And just remember, every time you pull that bolt back, you're shaking that rifle, and that's shaking that scope, and just ever slowly moving that scope off the sight there, making it more and more inaccurate. The rifle was discovered on the 6th floor of the 6th book of the Texas Schoolbook Depository, could not have caused any of the wounds of Kennedy, Connolly, or Teague except by accident. So, very, very accurate there. Oswald's paraffin test. A few hours after the assassination, Oswald underwent a test that was routinely carried out on most subjects having fired a gun. Liquid paraffin wax was spread on his hands and right cheek. When the hardened, the paraffin wax could be extracted from deep in the pores of the skin. Any fine residues could have given off the firing of a gun, even if it had washed his skin in the meantime. Another thing to remember too, if you want to go full conspiracy, is that, you know, whoever's doing that test can definitely fake a paraffin test, you know. So it doesn't mean just because the paraffin tested positive on his hands that actually Oswald fired that gun. But I would say it was pretty accurate though, because if they found positive on his hands and they faked it, why not fake it for his cheek too? Alright, let's see. A few hours after the assassination, let's see. Barium and antimony, which are found in gunpowder residues, are also found on several common substances such as printing ink, which Oswald certainly had handled on the morning of the assassination. The presence of the substance is not sufficient evidence of having fired a gun, but the absence is sufficient of evidence of not have fired a gun. And see, now one thing people don't understand is that when Oswald would put together this box, okay, of books, you put together the box of books, there's a table downstairs, you tape it up, and then they had like ink rolls that you could roll out the address to where it was going. So, it's my understanding they had plates, okay, that already had the pre-printed address of some of the clients they were sending out a lot of books to. And so all you had to do is roll that plate like a stamp through ink, and then you would put that and impress it onto the front of the box, and then boom, it's good to go. You don't have to sit there and try to write it out or anything like that. That would increase the accuracy that the mail service would get that to the correct address. Now that ink would come back positive later on as a paraffin test. So if you're just handling that, that would put you positive, and doesn't mean that you fired a gun. And let's see, firing a gun would deposit barium and antimony on parts of the skin close to the gun. If barium and antimony were found on Oswald's skin, they may have been deposited by firing of a gun, but they may have instead been deposited by other means, for example, the handling of books. If barium and antimony were not found on Oswald's skin, it also most certainly did not fire a gun. Spectrographic analysis. Oswald's paraffin caps was subjected to two analyses. Spectrographic analysis, the method normally used by the police, showed evidence of barium and antimony on Oswald's hand, but not on his cheek. Neutron activation analysis on Oswald. Spectrographic analysis was considered sufficient reliable for criminal investigations, but in the case of more incisive tests, was also used neutron activation analysis, which capable of identifying the presence of substance. Now, I was reading that paraffin tests weren't admissible in court because of the unreliability of it. So what that meant, the unreliability, is that you could have nitrates on your skin and the paraffin not test positive. But if you had nitrates on your skin and the paraffin tested positive, that meant that you definitely fired a gun. So basically it was sort of like this, and I don't know the percentages, that you could have nitrates on your skin and the paraffin test 60% of the time, 80% of the time would test positive, and say 10-20% of the times would test negative. So if you had a positive paraffin test, it meant that you definitely fired a gun. If you had a negative paraffin test, it meant that you could have either fired a gun, like 10-20% chance, or not have fired a gun, say 60-70-80% chance. That's my understanding. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I've read so far. And I love this one, that the FBI, let's see. Anyway, the FBI did test by having, J. Edgar Hoover had like 20 guys go out and fire rifles. And when they did paraffin tests, that almost all of them, 7 marksmen fired a rifle of the same type found on the 6th floor. The standard paraffin test was administered, and the paraffin test subjected to neutron activation. All 7 subjects showed substantial amounts of barium and antimony on their hands, and more importantly on their cheeks. So when Hoover had 7 FBI agents fire a rifle, they all came back as positive for the paraffin test. So there you go. Anyway, so keep moving on and keep driving forward here. This is interesting. I came across this just by accident. I'm always using this Justia U.S. Law, and you get a lot of good cases there. And so apparently what happened is that I guess when they finished with the weapon, or no, what happened is the rights to the weapon were sold by Mrs. Oswald, Marina, to this other person here. I wonder if they list it. Yeah, Mr. Kilgore, William Garrett and Eugene Larry Kilgore and Kilgore. I'm guessing that's who the plaintiffs were. Anyway, so the rights to the weapons, the rifle and the handgun, were sold by Marina to this attorney, publisher, whatever. And so after a reasonable amount of time, say like 2 years, they went to the government and said, hey, we'd like to get this weapon back since you've proven your case that, or you've got your case that Oswald committed the crime. We bought the rights from the plaintiff's wife, which under law, if the person dies, all the property would go, and they didn't have a will, would go to their spouse, okay? So she would be the rightful owner of the weapon. And then they sued the government to get the weapon back. The government went to court and said, no, because the weapon was used in a federal crime, that the rights of the person that committed the crime or the person who inherited those rights are forfeited because it was used in a federal crime against a federal person, namely the president. So it looks like the judge agreed with that, and that's really interesting. So this is how the rifle ends up in the National Archives, because right now the ATF has it, or back then the ATF have it, and then they hand it over to the National Archives. That was very interesting. I thought that was pretty cool. Alright, and this is an interesting little video I came across here, so we'll take a look at it.
He was murdered. The New York Times pronounced Oswald as the killer of President Kennedy. The Warren Commission concluded that Ruby shot Oswald acting alone. It was not premeditated or planned, and Ruby had no help entering the building.
People had
entering the building. No help entering the building. Planned, and Ruby had no help. It was not premeditated. Shot Oswald. Concluded that.
Let's take a look at that in slow motion. That was very interesting. Alright. Okay, here we go. Now, look, right before Ruby gets to him, you'll see this flash right on Oswald's sweater in his abdomen area.
Ruby shot.
You see that?
Oswald.
There. My question is, if a little 22, or whatever this was, 38, shooting Oswald in the abdomen, killed him, but, you know, Conley gets, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wounds with this big rifle round and still survives. How's that possible? So yeah, that's a good little section. You can see where Oswald, he's grimacing, so he's moved his arm over. Let's take a look here.
Acting alone. It was not premeditated or planned, and Ruby had no help entering the building.
People had so much to gain and had such a material motive to put me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come above board to the world.
2 months after winning his appeal and being granted a new trial outside of Dallas, Jack Ruby was found riddled with cancer in his prison cell. He was placed in the hospital, and 1 month before his new trial was to begin, he died. The Warren Commission never exposed Ruby's connections to the Mafia, the FBI, or with gun-running and gambling figures in Miami and Cuba.
On other parts of the case that the government put against Lee Oswald, obviously he was dead. He had no chance to have cross-examined. witnesses. He had no lawyer appointed.
Right. These people have given me a hearing without legal representation or anything. I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir.
Yeah, I find interesting that usually, 72 hours? Within 72 hours, a good lawyer could get a writ habeas corpus for Oswald. And what that is basically is either give up the body or give me bail. So this is why Oswald had to be killed on Sunday, because by Monday he would have had a lawyer and then gone before a judge, and the judge would have had to decide what the bail would have been. Of course, they probably wouldn't have released him on bail, or they probably wouldn't release. They probably would have made it like $2 million, $5 million, something like that. Something he definitely couldn't get. But at least he'd have a lawyer. But to go 1-2 days with no lawyer, no one giving him legal advice, and just being hounded by the press, hounded by the police, and no one else to talk to. That's just incredible means of injustice, and also most likely could probably be a good reason for appeal to get Oswald if he'd been convicted of the charge thrown out, because he didn't have a lawyer for 24 hours, or 48 hours, and basically was being paraded before the news media. How could Oswald get a fair trial anywhere in the country?
Mark Lane, an attorney out of New York, tried to get legal representation for Lee Oswald. In fact, went to the commission and asked, "Can I represent Lee Oswald?" And they denied it because, again, this is not a typical court hearing.
And again, you got to wonder. The whole basis for Garrison getting involved in this entire mess was the fact that his friend Dino, this lawyer in New Orleans, had received a call, he said, from a guy named Clay Bertrand, who it turns out Clay Bertrand was Clay Shaw, who, don't forget, was the head of the Trademark Center where Oswald was passing out the flyers. It was seen several times in Bannister's office. And so the thing you got to figure, though, is if Bannister and Shaw and these right-wing people in the organization were trying to frame Oswald and pin everything on him, why would Shaw go to the trouble of calling Dino in the hospital and asking him to represent Oswald in his defense? Isn't that kind of strange, I think? Because you see you see Shaw trying to help Oswald, get his discharge from the Marines changed, because it had been changed. Basically, what happened is when he got discharged early, he was supposed to, what I've read, and a lot of people think this is nefarious, but I don't think it's nefarious on the Navy's part. When you finish your active duty, you're supposed to complete a couple years of reserve duty. And so Oswald, that he defected to the Soviet Union, wasn't able to do his reserve duty. And he didn't notify the Navy that he was out of the country or anything like that. So then they changed his status, because that's part of your, active discharge status, is fulfilling your reserve status. He didn't do the reserve status, so that's why they changed it to dishonorable discharge. And that's why Oswald was trying to get that changed, okay? Because it's like, hey, I was out of the country. I was betraying my country. A lot of people say that he got it, it was changed because of his defection to the Soviet Union. I think it was just a simple matter of fact that he didn't complete his reserve obligation. And then again, if you think about it, if Oswald's an agent of the Office of Naval Intelligence of the government, why would they, he's on a mission to the Soviet Union for them, why would they say he's give him a dishonorable discharge. Anyway, Oswald was working with this Dino guy, lawyer, and going in there, trying to get his status changed, and Shaw seems to be taking care of that for him. Okay? So, I don't know why would Shaw, if Shaw was involved, I mean, that's essentially what Garrison was saying, is that Shaw was the New Orleans kingpin, or not kingpin, the New Orleans organizer for the plot, and why would he be helping Oswald after the assassination? It seems like they would just let him, rot in jail or something like that, which is essentially what they did. But then Dino backs up and tries to make these excuses, saying, "Oh, I was on medication. I didn't know what I was saying." But he was on medication, but he was cognitive enough to call a friend of his to go to Dallas and handle the case, and the guy declined, and then that's how the FBI found out about it, because after Oswald gets shot, then this guy calls the FBI and says, "Yeah, this lawyer, friend of mine, Dino, called me and asked me to go represent, because he was sick in the hospital, asked me to go to Dallas and, do legal representation for Oswald." So I find that interesting, whatever all that means. So the thing that I find about the entire assassination is that there's no smooth good guys, bad guys, like in a Marvel movie. Good guys always do bad, good guys always do good, and bad guys always do bad. It's more of a gray area, that things happen and they point towards Oswald being completely innocent, and then other things happen that point to Oswald being involved in something. Okay? And it's very strange how these things happen. Anyway, we'll keep going.
This commission has functioned in a fashion which totally disregards the rights of the accused.
Absolutely.
I can tell you from my experiences, having tried several hundred cases to verdict, and being responsible for thousands of cases as head of the criminal courts and running the homicide bureau, that I don't believe there's any courtroom in America where Oswald would have been convicted on the evidence that was presented before the Warren Commission.
I don't know if anybody is innocent.
I disagree with that. I think that the weight of pressure on the jury, that, don't let Kennedy's death go in vain, and the pressure on the jury and the national media to at least blame someone, okay, if there was a jury, to put the blame on someone, because if Oswald didn't do it, then who did it? And, the Warren Commission, the government, if they were prosecuting Oswald, was just on this one track that only Oswald was responsible, they would be, any juror would be under a tremendous amount of pressure to convict Oswald, regardless of the evidence, because, Kennedy's such a great guy. How can you let Kennedy's memory die like this by this loser? And if Oswald didn't do it, then who did it? We haven't presented any evidence to you showing that someone else did it, so it's got to be Oswald, right? But I think that Oswald's case eventually would have been thrown out on appeal. There would have been a lot of political pressure to keep it. But, if you had a lawyer or judges that were following the evidence, especially with the paraffin tests and no fingerprints on the weapon, that's just a sheer giveaway to throw that shit out. And once you throw that shit out, you have no case. But then again, it goes back, that's a problem with our justice system, is that, even though you're supposed to go by the evidence, people are always, they say they're going by the evidence, but it's bullshit. It's like, well, if he didn't do it, I haven't seen any evidence of anyone else doing it, so we'll just put it on him, because at least maybe he must be involved somehow. And if there's others, then maybe they'll bring others to court. That seems to be the preponderance there. Alright, so keep going.
The case which has been presented against him is full of falsehoods and contradictions. And I know that right now in the office of the Dallas District Attorney is a paraffin test which shows But Lee Harvey Oswald did not fire a rifle on November 22nd, 1963. I know that because I have a photographic copy of that
There you
rifle.
go. So that was really poor evidence that Oswald didn't fire a rifle. He didn't even mention the paraffin test at the very end. The rest of the time he spent talking about Ruby. But anyway, we'll keep going on, keep driving on here. All right, now I just found this.
Hickok 45 of the Dallas Police Department. Glad you came by today.
Hold on
Why
one
am I
second.
doing this?
So this one I just found on YouTube. This looks like a Kokano, Manufacturer Kokano rifle. He's going to test it out, and we're going to see what he does on it. Just to get a feel for the rifle.
Italian rifle, and it's set up like a fairly famous setup, as you probably already know, right? And it is called, are you ready? The Carcano. Or no, wait, it's the Carcano. Yeah, well, we'll decide how to pronounce it. You always want to use the proper pronunciation. And you also don't want to ever mispronounce the word pronunciation and say pronunciation, okay? Just a little tip, no charge. Yeah, this is the firearm that is famous from Dallas, 1963. November 22nd, right? And that's a famous photograph. I thought I would run that off and show it in case you haven't seen it. I can't imagine by not having seen that. Yeah, this is a Carcano. It is a Model 38 set up exactly the way Lee Harvey Oswald had his. A fellow locally here in the Nashville area offered to lend this to us. He has been setting this up and everything this way, and wanted to know if we would like to borrow it for a video. And I said, yeah, because I'd never done a Carcano, and I always thought, if I do one, probably do the carbine or the M38, whichever one it was, you know, just probably just maybe one, because I'm not a huge fan of the Carcano. I'm not a huge fan of it to begin with. I mean, you're okay. But if I do one, I'd like maybe to do this one, okay? I am not, like, fascinated with firearms that are involved in, like, murders and that sort of thing. I think y'all know that. Some people aren't. But it does have a lot of history, especially this model set up this way. So, thought I would share it with you and the firearms. So we'll talk a little bit about the Kennedy thing, and then we'll talk about the Carcano, okay, or Carcano. Which would you rather I pronounce it? You know, on that topic, I saw a video, I don't know, it's been a while back, some guy by the name of Ian, on some channel by the name of Forgotten Weapons. And he said Carcano. I heard him say Carcano. And it came to me because my entire life I heard everybody pronounce it Carcano, okay? And whenever I heard it. But when I heard Ian say Carcano, I thought, you know what? Everybody else is probably wrong. Because Ian is a smart guy. Everybody knows that. Gun Jesus is a smart guy. And he is a scholar. So he's probably right. I researched it, yeah, as if I had to. He is right. It is Carcano. The stress is on the first syllable. Syllable.
Syllable?
Okay.
Wow.
Everybody, even the curators at the NRA Museum, and anybody you see talk about it, almost other than Ian, who gets it right, says Carcano. Okay? So I'm going to say Carcano so you won't be so annoyed. It's kind of like the grand daring thing, you know. So Carcano is what it will be today. All right. And yeah, this is the exact setup, and we'll shoot it, and I'll tell you about it. But this is the exact scope. The viewer bought that scope from, was it Reading?
Wow, the same one.
Sporting goods store in California, and they're the
I've
ones
actually been
who
in that
imported
store,
all this
actually.
from Japan,
It's on Hollywood
back
Boulevard
in
there.
Whenever it was, 1960 or something. And then they sold a bunch of them to Klein's Sporting Goods in Michigan, and that's where Oswald ordered it from. And they bought I think thousands of scopes in that one buy. So this scope, literally, this scope that's on this rifle, was shipped with the same one that Oswald used. You know, I mean, right next to it when they picked him up to ship his when he ordered it, mailed it.
So just to let you know how this works, okay? So at the end of the war, okay, in Japan and Italy and Germany, there's all these millions of rifles and weapons sitting and ammunition sitting around. Okay? The government, they've demilitarized the Japanese government, the Italian government, the German government. So they're not going to be using those weapons. Now, some of these weapons may be kept and issued by the U.S., because we were the occupier, to some kind of local police force that the U.S. has set up during the occupation. Eventually, some of these weapons will be given back to the German army, the Japanese new self-defense army, whatever. But the vast majority, say 75-80% of these weapons, they had either Americans or Europeans would come over and make bids for it. Just like, people bid for old army surplus material. Once, you get new uniforms or get new rifles or new tanks, whatever, you sell off, auction off the old stuff. The government tries to get some money back for its investment. So that's what the government did. So a lot of these, they don't sell them individually, they sell them in bulks. Maybe there's whole warehouses full of these rifles or boxes. So, the auctioneers would come in and sell off a whole warehouse or half a warehouse or 100 boxes or 1,000 boxes of rifles all at once. And so you have these wholesalers in America, Canada, South America, and whoever's going to have another war, they would come in and buy it wholesale prices. So if a rifle, usually like a retail rifle, say you retail this rifle for $100, well, the wholesaler, when he bought it, it would basically break down per rifle, be like $10, $20. Okay? And then there's shipping, they got to ship it back to the U.S., and then they got to distribute it and sell it off to these other retailers inside the U.S., like Klein's. And so that makes the price go up. And every time you do that, you buy it for $20 out of 100 in bulk in Japan. You ship it back to the U.S., that's added another $10, $20. You resell it to some retail store, that's added another $10, and now you're up to $50, $60. And then, Klein's is going to try to make a profit, so they're going to sell it for like $80, $100 and make their profit back. So that's where a lot of these weapons came from. And so you had a lot of these weapons that were left over in Italy, these carcanos, and they were sold in bulk, and then all these retailers would resell them in the United States, and they were still selling them, 20 years later. I mean, don't forget that 1963 is only, 18 years after, after World War II ended.
If that, matters to you, but I mean, it is. It's the same batch. It's the real deal. It's not a replica. Okay, it's not a great scope, but it's that's what it is. And this is a Model 38. The same gun. Same setup. It's the same gun. The Model 38 Carcano. Okay, and we'll talk about the rifle and the Carcano and everything. And I'll probably go back and forth on my pronunciation. Thanks to Ian for hearing that and getting that in my head the correct way to say it.
All right, so it looks like he's going to go on for a while. I want to see him fire the rifle, so let's kind of move forward to there.
Now, he got the scope to make it authentic and everything, but the scope is horrible. I mean, you just can't see. I don't know if we can give them a look. They'll wonder. That way they won't wonder why we don't look through it too much. But it's like imagine the cloudiest day of your life, the foggiest day of your life, which might be every day if you drink too much or sleep too late or something. Don't get any sleep. But it's really, really, really bad. But it's authentic, and that's pretty cool. And maybe it's fixable. I don't know. You can take it apart and clean it, or what that is. These older scopes, that's one area where technology has come so far in it. Scopes, and even cheap scopes today are like 1,000,000 times better than the old scopes. And but it has fixed sights and everything. And shoot, let's go ahead and shoot it if I can. Now I had a little issue with some of the clips, the unblocked clips, wanting to dump out the rounds kind of early and nosedive and some of that.
Now,
but the last couple that we fired.
Do you see what he just did there? Watch here. I'm going to slow it down. All right, let's take a look there. What I'm more interested in is action, how things are done. So let's take a look at him reloading that rifle. Watch.
And it has fixed sights and everything, and shoot was good.
Now let's watch. Watch as he puts this clip in.
Now, I had a little issue with,
You see now how he's having to hold that clip? You see that? He's got his thumb on the left side, his index finger, and another finger on the right side. You see they're pushing into the metal.
some of the clips and block.
So watch this. So he puts that in there.
Wanting to dump out the rounds kind of early.
See, look at that. You see? You're going to have to use your thumb to press into the top of that round, like I was saying earlier, that shell casing and that clip to push it down in there. And then you're going to have to use your fingers, okay? So you're going to have to hold the rifle somehow. You see how all his fingers are on that stock? You see? It's going to leave a really good impression of a fingerprint. Then his fingers here are going to have to pull. You're basically clasping it together, okay? And so you're going to have fingerprints on the metal part of this outside casing and the stock. So that you mean to tell me that Oswald did all this, okay? All these sections where the finger is connecting for good fingerprints and thumbprints, and nothing was found? Absolutely nothing? I mean, how's that possible? I'm not an expert on this, but it just seems common sense that if you're pushing down with your thumb, you're going to leave a thumbprint there. If you're grabbing this, having to counter force, you're pulling up, you're squeezing it together, you're going to put an impression of oil into that wood there, okay? I mean, think about how absorbent wood is. And if you got like a wood table and you drop some oil on that wood, it's going to soak in to that wood table, okay? And just take your hand and go over to a wood countertop and press your fingers into the wood countertop, okay? And then get a magnifying glass. You'll be able to see the oil from your fingertips right there on the wood. So you mean to tell me that this oil coming off your thumb and off your fingers is not going to hold and show up later in any kind of fingerprint powder? Is not going to catch that at all? But there's nothing. Oswald's fingerprints would be all over this rifle as he's loading it with the rounds, and then he's holding it, and then he's firing it, and then cocking it back. Watch, we're going to watch him fire this weapon now, okay?
Nosedive and some of that, but the last couple that we fired have done okay. So it's got nice fixed sights. They seem to be right on. I'll use the scope though on the first shot, okay, just to satisfy you all.
You see now, Oswald would have touched that bolt. Somewhere there's going to be a fingerprint on that bolt, or a thumbprint.
There, look for something big, Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this on. Everybody's seen the gun, how beautiful it is. Look at that beautiful walnut. So I'm going to cover the back of it. All right. So I'm going to shoot the gong. I know I can see it through the scope.
Now, look at his position. I wish we had a side angle on this. Look at those fingers. Maybe we can back up here. Hold on.
I better look for something big. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this on. Everybody's seen the gun, how beautiful it is. Look at that beautiful walnut.
You see?
Yes, I'm going to cover the back of it. All right. So I'm going to shoot the gong.
Look at that. He's holding it like you would have to hold that rifle. Oswald would have a thumbprint over here on the stock. He'd have a fingerprint on the trigger. Maybe some fingerprints on the bottom of the stock. He'd have a good, birdie finger imprint pressing into that stock right there. Maybe even a thumb on the side of the stock or the top of the stock or the barrel. You can't get away from it. It's impossible to fire this rifle without leaving fingerprints unless you're wearing gloves. And where are the gloves?
I know I can see
now
it.
watch.
So maybe. Wow, there it is. And I'm not even sure.
You see that? You have to push your fingers. You're going to have to hold that weapon by pushing in. See, that's why they have these grooves right here on the side of the weapon. You see, I don't know if you can see those little grooves. It's an indentation that goes into the stock, and that's so you can put your finger in there and hold that rifle and keep it from moving.
Here it's on. Like I said, we've had a little trouble.
It's not showing him cock it, but hopefully he'll get one where it shows him cocking it.
Let me try the metal side.
God, I wish they'd show him from the side. Is there one of him?
You know, the metallic side seemed like the pretty much clip fell out the bottom. You gotta be sure I don't step on it. I'm gonna pop.
You see that? Now he fired all those rounds and the clip fell out of the bottom.
Pop a 2-liter right here. All right.
You see that
so
action?
You see the clip comes out the bottom when you're empty.
And that's exactly, you see what he did right there?
There it is, right.
See, that's exactly what Oswald would do. He would grab that rifle just like that, pick up his clip, carry that rifle, run it over to the stairwell, hide it in the boxes back there. There's no way to get around this unless you're carrying gloves. You're wearing gloves. There's absolutely no way to get around not having any kind of fingerprints on the rifle. And then the thing you got to think about then is, if Oswald's not firing this rifle because he was down in the second floor lunchroom, the person who's firing this rifle knows they can't leave their fingerprints, so they're wearing gloves. Okay? Got to think about that.
All right, so that one did pretty well. That last round acted up a little bit. So, model 38. Okay, so
let's see. Does he fire it again?
Carcano. That is the way most people pronounce it. I did read that Carcano is really wrong. Carcano.
See, looks like he tries firing it again here. Let's go to there. You see that? Let's do that again. Watch the action.
Little Carcano. I'll get it right. Oh, there's a little center block down there.
You see that center block? That would be about the distance from Oswald's window down to Elm and Houston. Why not fire there? You got them. As soon as they're in that turn, you got them. They can't go fast enough to get out of the range. And look at the fingers. You see that? There's no way to get around it. Oswald, if he had been firing that rifle, unless he was wearing gloves, would have his fingerprints all over this rifle. Okay? And let's back up something. I want to see if something shows up here. Hold on a second. Almost done.
It feels as good as it can. No dark enough.
Another question I have, see, he had to put a pad there, okay? Did the police check Oswald's right shoulder to see if there was a bruise? Because he surely would have had a bruise firing those rounds. Anyway, let's take a look here. Now watch when he fires. Again, see? Fingers in that groove right there. There's no way you could have fired that weapon and not had fingerprints.
I'll get it right.
Watch.
Oh, this little center block down there.
You see that smoke? You see that? The same smoke that's coming out the front end is coming through this bolt. Okay? You can't seal it completely, so there's smoke and flash coming through this bolt right here, back into his face, into his cheek, into his hair, back onto his clothing. If Oswald fired that rifle, that gunpowder nitrate residue would be all over his face, his cheek, his hair, maybe even his ear, and on his shirt. If Oswald was handling ink and printers for boxes which have nitrates, or even went to the bathroom and peed and didn't wash his hands, he would have nitrates on his hands. Anyway, just something to think about, and we'll stop there, and we'll keep going with this topic and other topics tomorrow. I'm having fun. I don't know about you, but very interesting. All right, take care. Have a good one.